So hello and welcome back to the channel and welcome to another Project Cars 2 video. In today's video we're going to be looking at something a little bit special whilst still setting a few fast laps around Bathurst, but I just thought I'd give you a chance to listen to the soundtrack we're going to be hearing throughout the whole video. Now I'm not sure what else to say to that. This car even just ticking over sounds like an absolute beast. So I've got to say a massive thank you to Kevin Barber for suggesting doing something with the Camaro, the Mustang or the Daytona. But as soon as I got in this car, as soon as I saw it, I wanted to drive it. It's probably one of my all-time favourite looking cars and it just sounds amazing on the circuit. Having watched the link that he sent to the Bathurst Masters Touring Car Special, I just couldn't come away from this car without trying it. So thanks very much Kevin for suggesting this car and track combination. So let's get started with the video and make our way over to Bathurst. So arriving at the circuit, I've obviously spent a good hour getting to grips with how the car feels, and obviously as you can see, finding the limit of the car in as many areas as I can really. So as you're going through this process of finding out how the car performs, I'm not really messing around with any of the setup, I'm not really touching anything. The only thing that I've changed as per the last video I did was the steering ratio. I'm using 360 degrees on my wheel because I'm using the McLaren GT3 wheel, but I've brought the steering ratio down to about 10:0 I think. I'm not sure how that works out, but anyway. You're just trying to find a lap where you're fast enough to be consistent, and I sort of found that region to be within the 219s with this car. You're really pushing the car, I'm really giving it all I've got really in the setup that there is, and you're just trying to find anywhere really where you can better your line through the corners and just carry a little bit more speed, so you're not wanting to run just say 3 or 4 laps and think, well that's as fast as I can get. You know, I've spent a good hour trying to find the limit in this car, trying to get better, as if you're doing a time trial event where you've got no option to adjust the car at all, so you're really just trying to push with what you've got. Obviously we know we can change things during the setup, but the initial point is to try and find where the limit of the car is as it is. By that way you can figure out what you might be able to change, whether it be gear ratios or adding more camber or taking some of the downforce away, or especially in this car it feels very lurchy. It feels like it's got really soft suspension, but I later find out that that's just the way the car handles really. Making the suspension any harder didn't particularly help. But you're still just trying to find out where the balance is in the car, whether it's oversteering on corner entry or whether you're understeering a lot. But you're still trying to exploit how the car's set up in its basic form, so that you can then start to understand where you can make adjustments to the car itself in order to sort of find more time within the lap. And that doesn't need to be from driving faster. You're wanting to be exploring that in that first hour, really pushing the car. So as you can see there, we hit a 219.4, and that's really sort of where I'm wanting to start out with this. Hitting a 219.4 was pretty difficult to be fair initially, so that's where we're going to build on from this point. So any sort of changes I'm making from here on are to try and get faster than a 19.4. So let's have a look at the first couple of changes that I decided to make. So just looking at the replay here, I actually went back out to try and better this lap, because on the previous one I did actually run wide in this little section here just before the skyline, which I thought really did kill a bit of the lap and kill the entry to just going over the cliff there. So after running the lap I managed to get a 218.9, so that's where we're going to build on from there. So right from the off I just decided to close out the brake ducts because they're fairly wide, and I didn't see that the brakes were overheating so much, and obviously you're going to get a little bit of drag from that. bringing the brake bias a little bit more towards the front of the car to try and stop the oversteer on corner entry, and moving to the ride height, just trying to lower that as far as it's going to go really, get the car nice and low and nice and stiff, just trying to make the suspension a lot harder. So I went as far as it would go and thought, let's give that a whirl. And I also went ahead and increased the anti-roll bars. I felt like the car was lurching around quite a lot, so trying to make it as stable as possible. Now the worst thing I find about setting cars up at Bathurst is when you start the lap, you've literally got this one corner before you head out onto a massive long straight, before you actually really get into the crux of how the car differs from the setups that you've made. So you've got to go through this whole process of probably about 20 to 30 seconds before you're even going to get any idea as to how the car feels slightly different, unless you've changed the downforce or cambers possibly to get a better straight line speed. But coming into turn one, and initially the car just feels like I'm losing some front grip, almost as if the car's bogging down a little bit, like it's too low and it's just bottoming out as I come into turn one. It doesn't really feel any better at all being stiffer. It almost feels like I've lost mechanical grip, which is probably caused through friction just sliding across the surface, but it certainly doesn't feel better running a harder setup. So I go straight back in and make a few changes to the ride height. And then after another failed outing, I've sort of gone back out and come back in at this point and make the car softer again, because it really doesn't feel like it's having any benefit being harder. So once I'd gone back out and I was running my lap, the car just felt terrible. It felt like I'd made changes that were just making it so much worse. And I just felt like I needed to go back in and sort of start again. So just having gone back to choosing the loose setup and just literally starting the whole setup process again. So I've gone back into the steering ratio and changed it back to 10.0 and just thought I'd see if the car felt as it was before. But one of the things that I've still not noticed at this point was that the suspension page wasn't running symmetrical, and I don't actually notice this right till the very end of setting the whole car up, which was quite extraordinary to be honest. But I still go ahead and make a few little changes, and then we go back out and start setting some laps again. Now there comes a point during setups when you feel like you're just absolutely smashing your head against a brick wall, and it seems that it doesn't matter what you do to the car, it just doesn't feel like it's getting any faster. Now I went through numerous different things trying to increase the tyre pressures here to get more straight line speed, then heading back out and you just feel like you've lost all the grip that you initially had, going back in, reducing the tyre pressures to lower than they previously were, try and get some of that grip back. Maybe you think you've made a step too far and you've gone too much the other way, so heading back out, and then the car just feels sluggish. You go back in, you start again, you load the loose setup again, so I make all the small changes that I made initially. Going back out, it doesn't work again, try something new, increase the caster angles there, you go back out, it doesn't work again. And this just felt like such a recurring issue with this car. Every time I was going out, having made any sort of adjustments to the car, it just felt like I was miles away from the ghost that I initially set, which felt like hours ago at this stage. You're going through tiny adjustments thinking, is this going to benefit the car, and how is it going to benefit the car, and where is there issues with the car? But every time I was heading back out, coming back in at this stage again, thought I'd change the brake bias, and you're just going out lap after lap, making tiny errors that are just causing you to think, what the hell's wrong with this car? And I'm still chasing the same ghost that I was chasing hours ago. So I'm just making changes after changes after changes here with no real benefits whatsoever. So having gone back almost to a default setup again and just made the changes that I'd originally made, I started messing with the gear ratios and started to find that had quite a benefit. It seemed to be the only thing that was making the difference at that point, and I actually started to make a few adjustments within the gears and just started to get a little faster and a little faster. So gradually we started to make a little bit of progress. So here we are then. The following day, things just felt a little bit better. I had a little bit more insight into where the car was going to need adjusting, and that was definitely within the gears. Changing the gear ratios and just really messing around with where they felt like they had the most power. I felt like I was losing time coming up the hill, going up into the mountain section in second gear. Because this car only has 4 gears, everything needs to be done really within second and third gear, and it just felt like pulling up this section of the hill, second gear was just a little bit too long, so just brought the second gear down, I think just 1 click, so it felt a little bit quicker to respond through the acceleration phase, and also bringing third gear down as well. I also started to implement using the manual gearbox rather than using the paddles, just to get that faster gear change, and it all just started to come together really, and then it was a case of just trying to get that perfect lap all in one and just try and carry more speed down this section as well. It's always a tough section going down through this part of the course. It just feels like the car's wanting to run away from you, but it really is a case of having to get the line into the next corner just perfect really, in order to be on the power nice and early to carry that speed. And obviously you can see here the Ghost's still a tiny little bit ahead, but just through changing the gear ratios just gave you a little bit more confidence to carry more speed. This wasn't the Ghost from the previous day either. This was another 2:17 lap that I'm chasing, so I've had a few little goes the following day, managed to get a little bit of a better feel for the car, and just put in a blinding last sector here, which was my fastest final sector throughout the entire morning. I think I've probably done an hour's testing here, but yeah, finally got it nailed, finally hit that world record, hitting a 2:17.813, so really happy with that lap. So yeah, let's take a final look over this setup, and I'm not absolutely certain you couldn't set this lap with the default setup, so it's not massive changes. Obviously using the slick tyres and reduce the tyre pressures down fairly low. The brake pressure is going to be something you're going to choose for yourself, but I've just moved the brake balance a tiny bit more forward, just 1 click forward, and just closed out those brake ducts just to reduce some of the drag. The downforce left it as it was, and the longitudinal weight bias also left as it was. So at this stage the symmetrical option still wasn't ticked, and this was the actual setup that I used in order to set the fastest lap that I did. I have actually gone back in and made a symmetrical change and literally went back out and set, I think it was a 2:17.85, so a tiny bit slower, but I still felt like it could go just as fast. Didn't really feel like the changes were of any benefit. So yeah, this was the setup that I finally ran. 2.5, it was the front end really that was causing an issue. Front end grip was the deciding factor in how I started to set this car up. Not running as low as it'll go, and the suspension's still fairly soft. The toe angles made a huge difference to getting that turning response, and slightly stiffening the anti-roll bar at the front just to try and get more turning response really. That's what I'm always going for, but it was front end grip on this car which was the issue. I think trying to carry a lot of speed through the corners. Slightly lowered the bump stops just by 10mm, and I think I've left everything else as it was within the suspension setup. Obviously I've reduced the radiator, but I still think this car is just as fast with 100% open radiator, and the biggest change is really coming through second and third gear. This is really where I felt like the car through setup started to find some changes. A few tiny changes to the power ramp and coast ramp, just to cause the car to not to oversteer so much on corner exit, and it already rotated really nicely on the corner entry. So that's the setup, guys. So here we go then, approaching the start finish line, and we're going to be up into third gear. And again, just looking for the board on the right hand side, the 100-yard board, and just braking at the lamppost just after it. So about here, we're going to start to slow the car down and just waiting to get to closer to the apex before we're dropping down into second gear and letting the car run just right as wide as you can get it out onto that curb. Obviously not going too far in order to pick up a track limits penalty, but take the car as far as you can, leaving it right the way to the red line before we're changing gear. And like I said, I'm changing gear with the gear stick rather than the paddles at this point. Looking out on the left hand side again for the 100-yard board and starting to brake just a little bit after that, and dropping down nearer the apex into second gear. As soon as you can get on the power, do so, and again just letting the car run wide, sort of steering into any sort of slides that you can start to get. And just on the corner, we're just starting to brake, let the car run wide, don't change gear. We're going to stay in second gear all the way around here, and trying to not to allow the car to wheel spin too much and get any sliding through there. We're trying to maintain traction best we can. A little lift before we're going into there, and then up on the power, up into third gear just before we go over the rise, and then trying to touch this curb on the left hand side as we go in here to sort of drag the car around a little bit. As we go over the rise of the hill, again just a little lift and then back on the accelerator, trying to hug that inside. There's so much more grip on the inside of that section of the circuit, and just dropping down into second gear before we go over the skyline there, and then just allowing the car to run off the brakes for a little section. Most important corner here is hugging this as close as you can, because as soon as you're through that little dip, you need to be on the accelerator and not letting go of that accelerator till we get to this corner here, as we come round into Farmer's Elbow or Forest's Elbow, I forget what it is now, and then coming out, letting the car run wide, and it's just the acceleration phase down here. Changing gear, like I said, at the red line, all the way up into fourth gear, and looking to carry it out onto the apron on the left hand side here. Not getting too far wide because he will pick up a track penalty going too wide here. Bringing it in, there's two sort of skid marks on the floor where I start to brake, and then coming down into second gear, hugging that curb and trying not to hit any of these curbs on the acceleration phase. Just doesn't get the best amount of grip, and then just as the cones run out on the left hand side, they're going down into second gear, trying to get a little bit of this curb again to drag the car around, and then accelerating and across the line. So thanks for watching as always, and I'll leave you now with the replay. If you still haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please do so. Leave a comment in the comments section. I always get back to everyone that leaves a comment, and I really do appreciate any of them, to be fair. Remember to hit that thumbs up button as well, helps all the YouTube algorithms. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Ciao for now.